Welcome everyone to Heart Snuggles. We're stoked you're here today, and we hope that you have found something to smile about. And today, this my bestie's back on, and I'm really excited to share her with you. This is a wild story, but I think it's really important because a lot of people do experience this, and it's not talked about enough. So, anyways, go ahead and give yourself a little intro, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Lex, and thanks so much for having me on. My name is Kasey. I am a mental health advocate, president of a nonprofit for mental health, the Scooty Fund. During the day, I'm an art advisor, and I'm in school to become a therapist. Right now, I am living in Sun Valley, Idaho, and yeah, just so thrilled to be able to talk with all of you today.
Thanks, Case. Yeah, you've had such a great, you have so much on your plate, but it's so cool how you always are tapping into your creativity and supporting others. It's so beautiful to watch that and to witness all the magic you create. So thank you. And would love to hear about what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you.
Random act of kindness someone did for me last night. It's really dark in the Sun Valley area. Like they don't really have road lamps because they want to keep like the sky dark so you can see the stars. There's also a lot of wildlife. So I was driving or going to drive home from dinner last night, and my car is kind of small. So one of my friends told me to drive behind her because her car's big. And so if there were any, like animals that happened to be in the road, this sounds kind of morbid, but like she would reach them first. And if that did happen to happen, her car would not be as damaged as my car would. So she trailed her home.
That's such a nice random act of kindness, and it's the reality of the situation. Like those animals come running out of nowhere sometimes, so it's
Yeah.
well, that's a nice friend. Thanks to her. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty, and I'd love for you to share your near death experience.
How much detail should I share? Like how far back should I go in it?
As much as you feel comfortable with.
Okay. So I had been dating this guy, we'll call him Larry, dating Larry for about a year, and we were living together. And from the beginning, I'd kind of seen some red flags, and I didn't really listen to myself. And it got to the point that those red flags that I had seen at the beginning were really growing, and I was not happy in the relationship, to put it shortly.
Can you share some of the red flags just so people are like aware?
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed within like the first week of us hanging out and going on dates is that he never asked me questions. He talked about himself all the time, and I asked him a lot of questions, but it wasn't reciprocal. And at the time, I very much have like a growth mindset, and I'm always trying to learn from things. So I was thinking, like, okay, well, this is a great opportunity for me to learn how to be more assertive in conversations and just naturally like share more without being asked to share. But on his end, that behavior continued throughout the relationship. It felt very, I guess, unequal, unreciprocal in how our interactions were. So I felt very much like the giver. And when he was in conversation with me or with others, it seemed like he was very self-centered. I also noticed pretty early on that he didn't exhibit a lot of empathy. So from my understanding, empathy can be taught and learned. So I don't want to say, like he just didn't have empathy, but that was something that he did not develop over the course of our relationship either. So I felt like I was in a position of consistently giving, My emotional needs weren't being met. And there was a lack of empathy in how he interacted with the world, which really bothered me beyond just like our interaction. It was his interaction with the world at large. And again, this is what I perceive. This is, my experience of the relationship. So I don't want to, state anything as objective truth or color that. But so those were some of the major red flags early on. He also was significantly less motivated than me. And I know I can be overly goal oriented and pack my schedule. So again, with his kind of extreme opposite, he didn't have a job when we first started dating. He wasn't really looking. He was just relaxing. And with his kind of mindset, I was like, oh, I can learn from this too. Like I can take on some of these characteristics. And rather than listening to my gut and saying like, I honestly don't want a partner who is completely opposite of my kind of goal setting way of being. So anyways, those things kind of like added up throughout the relationship. And there were a few times when I expressed, like it really bothered me how you didn't seem to have empathy like for this person in that situation. And it really didn't get through to him. So I ended up breaking up with him in April. But by that time we had moved in together and we had gotten a dog together. And we had a long conversation. And because of kind of those extraneous factors of sharing an apartment and sharing a dog, I decided to try things, like I actually wrote out this list of what I'm looking for in a partner that I would hope he could work on. And it wasn't like, things that they were behavioral changes. So things that I believe that someone can change about their behavior and about the ways that they interact. And we talked about that and he said he would work on it. But I wasn't able to, I think, get out of that space where I was, seeing all of these problematic aspects of our relationship. Like after we had that initial conversation, I just was not able to get back into like a true emotional, trusting relationship with him. So I ended up breaking up with him again about 3 weeks later. And I should preface all of the story that I'm sober and that he had been sober for about a year by the time I broke up with him, or maybe like a year and a half, because he was sober 6 months when we started dating. So he had been sober for a year and a half. I had that other conversation about, really breaking up with him and that I needed to figure out my own stuff, that I had my own issues in relationship and I needed to work on my relational patterns, and, needed to be on my own in order to do that. And that was completely true. I do need to work on my relational patterns and I've been doing that. But we still have the condo together. We still have the dog together. So I ended up moving all of my belongings and stuff into our guest room and sleeping there. And he stayed sleeping in the master. And after about a week of that, he started drinking again. And his behavior became very erratic. And I was really concerned about him dying by suicide because he had had suicidal ideation in the past. And I knew about this. And he was expressing to me that he was really depressed and really anxious and couldn't manage what he was feeling. So I was really concerned about that. He was, I think, taking out his frustration with the relationship ending on me verbally. So I was kind of withstanding verbal attacks of that I'm a sociopath, that I'm going to be a terrible therapist. A lot of stuff that like really kind of got to my core and that I actually am worried about. I'm not concerned that I'm a sociopath. I know I have empathy, but like I am concerned that, like, what if I'm not a good therapist? What if I'm, more harmful to people than I am helpful? And he really kind of picked up on those things that I was concerned about in myself, and threw them back into my face repeatedly. And throughout all of these interactions that happened over the course of like 3 days, I remained very calm because I understood that he was coming from a place of hurt, and just kind of let him yell and scream at me until he was done, and then would check on him and each night to make sure he, like hadn't taken a bottle of pills while I was in the other room or something. So it was a really, really challenging like 3 or 4 days. And finally, it was, I think, the fourth or the fifth day after he had started drinking again, I came home from having dinner with my parents, and he started laying into me again, verbally, about just how I'm a terrible person, about I had gotten lunch with a friend of both of ours earlier in the day, and he was saying how I should have asked him to get lunch with this person, and just really, really challenging for me to hear and to be the recipient of. So I told him that, I was going to pack a bag and I was going to stay at my parents' that night. His brothers had flown into town because they were concerned about his health. And I told him, like, your brothers are here for a reason. They're here to support you. Like, you can reach out to them. I can't be that person for you tonight. So went into the guest room, which is where I'd been sleeping, started packing my bag, and he came in and was saying stuff about how, like, I was abandoning our dog by sleeping at my parents that night. Again, like, getting to the core of a lot of things that I worry about myself. And I just, again, let him take his frustration, anger, emotions out on me. I stayed very calm. And he left the room. And the next time I looked up from the bag I was packing, he was coming into the room with his arms outstretched, and he started strangling me. And I was in a position that I could fight back, but he's a lot bigger and was a lot stronger. So he was kind of like strangling me first on the bed, and any breath I could get, I would scream like as loud as I could. But our apartment walls are pretty thick. So I was screaming. I was praying that someone would hear me. I was trying to fight back. I was like scratching at his eyes because I had heard that's what you're supposed to do with a shark. So like my brain was just firing on, how do I get out of this? Like, this guy is going to kill me. I was able to kind of get out of his grasp for a second. And I remembered that I had pepper spray in my desk, which was in our guest room. I ran towards my desk drawer, and before I could get there, Larry pulled my hair back and like pulled my head back so that I fell over backwards onto the ground. And he started strangling me again at that point. And I was in a position then that I could not fight back. So he was putting all of his pressure on my neck. I couldn't fight back, and my airway was completely cut off. So I don't know exactly how long, but there was a series of seconds probably that I was conscious and aware of having the thought that I was dying. And that stands out to me so clearly. My first thought was actually that I had heard drowning is really peaceful. And in that moment, it was like, but my lungs hurt because my lungs were starting to really hurt. And I'm like, this isn't that peaceful if it's anything like drowning. And then my brother died by suicide through hanging himself. And I had the really morbid thought that both of us were going to die by strangulation. And another really kind of morbid thought, but being happy that I wasn't leaving behind a mess of my life. Like my finances were in order, my house was clean, so that, you know, when my parents had to come back and like go through their daughter's stuff, they wouldn't find anything troubling. And then I had the thought that I was really sad to be dying, and that like I felt too young, and that there was still, not necessarily too young age wise, but that there were still things in this world that I wanted to do. I still really want to help people. And like, I didn't feel like I had been able to do that to the extent that I wanted to. But through all of those thoughts, there was just this kind of knowing that I was dying. And with that, an acceptance of that fact, which for me was the weirdest thing. Like I was able to accept it and be like, okay, this is happening, without being really angry about it or scared, more just kind of like sad. Like, all right, well, I wish I could be alive longer. But anyways, I think I blacked out after, you know, having that series of thoughts, because the next thing I knew, I was kind of on my side and I was able to like get some air into my lungs. And Larry was behind me still, you know, holding my neck, but his grip had loosened a little bit. And I was able to get out like, I won't tell anyone. And his grip loosened a little bit more. And I told him, like, I still love you. We won't be able to get back together if I'm dead. And, you know, kind of just like saying the things that I hoped he wanted to hear so that I could break free, which I did. So after his grip loosened a little bit more, after I said those things, I was able to jump up, and he jumped up as well. He actually ran out of the room yelling that he needed a gun, either to shoot me, shoot himself, I don't know. But I ran to my desk. I got the pepper spray that was in there. And when Larry ran back into the guest room, I pepper sprayed him. And I ran out. He followed me. I pepper sprayed him again. And I ran out of our house. And thank God, his brothers had been kind of cruising around the block. Because like I said, they were there because they were concerned about his health and they hadn't heard from him. And so they were like pretty much right in front of the house when I went running out, and they like pulled over in their car. They jumped out, they ran inside. And I forgot to mention, when I grabbed the pepper spray from the desk when Larry ran out of the room, saying that he needed a gun, I had also like texted his brother super quick that Larry just tried to strangle me. Wasn't able to finish my sentence, but could hit send before Larry came back in the room. So again, the brothers were like right there. And they came in, they restrained him. My dad happened to be in our parking lot, which was just like total luck, because he had been worried about me after, you know, the 4 days of putting up with Larry's like verbal abuse. So he was there. He called 911 and the police came and they took Larry to jail. But it really, I've done a lot of like PTSD work with my therapist in the couple months since then, or in the couple months right after. And it's been weird, honestly. I feel like I learned a lot, but I'm still processing what that is. So
Yeah. It's so hard to hear that story again. I want to thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that's really crazy that you were able to like accept the fate. It's like you had nothing else, you know, it's like, this is it. That's such a weird feeling to have to surrender into that, and just like having to experience that from someone that you loved so dearly and was so close to you and was like going to be, potentially your life partner. And then here you are like about to be killed by him out of nowhere, having no signs like that before. Oh, I must have just, yeah, like, so how are you feeling for like the month after that?
Um, in terms of like the acceptance of, I guess, death, I'm just going to speak bluntly. Like, in terms of the acceptance of death, I actually felt really good about that because I think 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been terrified of dying, particularly because I don't think my life was in any sort of way that I wanted to leave it with other people. So it felt really validating to be able to kind of like look at my life and be like, wow, okay, like I do feel pretty good about the work that I've done over the past few years and where I am now. I also felt very on guard constantly. It was really hard for me to relax my body. It was really hard for me to fall asleep at night. And even though I knew that Larry was out of the area, I had a confirmation. I still just like would lock my doors and check if I locked them, became kind of afraid of like opening the shower curtain. Just very much like on edge and watching for anything that might like take me by surprise. And there was one instance when I kind of experienced the re-traumatization, or not re-traumatization, but I was triggered when my dog got hit by a biker and the police came to the scene again. And just having the police there was super triggering for me. And I kind of went into like this crying, couldn't stop crying, couldn't really get my breathing to regulate, just spiral of anxiety and tears and very strong emotions that I couldn't necessarily decipher like what they were in this moment. But yeah, that first month was really challenging. And I think it's gotten easier since. I've really focused on routine, on talking a lot with like my good friends, on redecorating my space, creating a space where I feel like it's kind of an oasis, serenity, and actively like bringing moments of serenity into my life and creating the structure that I need to feel like I'm not, feel like I can manage the unknown as much as possible. Even though I know it's impossible, it's just like any sense that I can manage or control outcomes or events that I have coming up has really decreased my anxiety.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to work through that. There's no rule book on how to recover from something like that. And I'm just proud of you for leaning on your support and um, for just being as compassionate as you can with yourself through the journey, because it's PTSD is so scary. And especially, yeah, like what you went through, it's really hard. And especially to have to live at the same place too, that you were together and make it a new place. And there's a lot of components there.
Thanks, Lex. You've
Yeah.
really
Yeah, I was so happy to be able to help from afar, but it was hard not to be there for you. Like that. Yeah, as a friend, it's like, holy, like I cannot believe, just hearing those stories just makes me hurt so bad too. So I just can't imagine how you felt. And I'd love for you to just share like a few tips that your therapist gave you that helped you through the PTSD.
Yeah. So we did a fair amount of exposure therapy, and that involved, thinking about or checking in on myself physically beforehand. So, like, what are my emotions that I'm experiencing? How strong are these emotions? Where are they coming from? And then I would tell her my story or tell her the story of what happened. close my eyes, picture the events going on. And after I finished, I would check in with my emotions again. And through repeating that, we were able to get to a point where, to me, sharing that story isn't triggering like it might have once been. And remembering the events is not triggering for me. So I think a deep understanding of emotions and your own emotional experience, as well as, telling your story, was important for me. I definitely had an experience in the beginning of feeling like, not like I was to blame for what happened, but that I could have prevented it. And I really felt like I should have, that I shouldn't have gotten into a relationship with Larry, that I shouldn't have let him move in with me, that I should have handled things differently with the breakup. And, really took on a lot of this kind of shame and guilt of like, if I had done things differently, then he wouldn't have been so hurt and he wouldn't have acted in that way. And I really had to realize that a lot of people experience deep pain and deep hurt. And quite honestly, they don't try to kill other people. So kind of recognizing like, okay, yes, I can learn from this situation. I can listen to my voice, my inner knowing earlier on in relationships or from the beginning. And it's not, it's rational to expect someone not to try to cause physical harm. So kind of holding both things in that one place, in the same space, has been very helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, routine really helps me, and my deep relationships with my friends and my family, and being very honest with them and loving them and letting them love me, and staying connected.
So great. That's exposure therapy sounds scary. That sounds like really triggering, but I guess like thinking about myself, like the more I've told my stories that have been painful, the less weight they carry, but that still just seems intense to do like right after.
Yes. And I would not recommend anyone do it like alone by themselves. I would definitely have, for me, I really valued the presence of a therapist. If, therapy is cost prohibitive or something like that, definitely have someone who has the ability and the knowledge to lead you through that.
Mm. Yes, I think that's super important because I was just thinking like I hope people don't try that on their own because it is not something you can do on your own.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I'm just so happy that you're here and alive and that didn't happen. And yeah, and that you can share that story and hopefully help people listen to those red flags earlier. And if they are in that situation, like, yeah, I think what you did the best you could. But I think that was great how you were like, what does he want to hear? How can I loosen the grip? I've always thought about that. I'm like, what would I do if someone was kidnapping me? What would I say? And it's like, I don't know. So yeah, but I'm so proud of you for calling the cops because I've known lots of women in particular, but I know it could be either gender or any gender, that haven't even called the cops after being hurt like that. Cause yeah, it's crazy. So I'm really proud of you for reaching out to the support and knowing that that's not okay.
Yeah, honestly, like any kind of partner violence demonstrates a deep lack of respect. And in my opinion, that lack of respect is not a part of love. So if there's any instance of that, I know it's hard, but I would really encourage people to take the necessary steps to protect themselves physically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And as a friend, what were some things that were really helpful if it's like a friend listening that their friend went through something like that? Like, what did you like receiving as a person that went through that?
Lexi, like I said, you like the way you showed up was so influential and impactful. Like you sent me a playlist to help increase my sense of safety. And I listened to that like night after night after night, so that I could try to calm down somatically. My mom, I forget if it was the next day or 2 days later or something, but she took me out of the area for like a long day of hiking and getting lunch and just kind of getting out of like that intense context was really helpful. Um, just having people, feel be open to asking about it and listening made me feel like, okay, it's okay for me to talk about this, like I don't need to be ashamed of what happened. Um, so yeah, I think really like the main thing was people turning towards in whatever that looked like for them, turning like towards me without judgment, um, and just helping me feel surrounded and loved was really key. There have been like, just in saying what doesn't work, I went on I was dating like this guy for a couple months after everything happened with Larry. And I told him, what had happened. And the first thing out of his mouth was like, well, you don't seem crazy. As if, like crazy women like get hurt or like women deserve, what their like physical violence if and when they're crazy. And those kind of like judgmental remarks, those were really hurtful to receive. And thank goodness there weren't many of them. Um, but yeah, I think that just coming from a place of non-judgmentalness, of recognizing that this is something traumatic, most likely, um, and just kind of showing up to be there was is really helped me.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And oh, that makes me sick in the fucking stomach. Oh my gosh, that's so awful. It's like, yeah, yeah. That's just never okay to say to someone. And it's like, cool, we can understand where they're coming from. They've probably been hurt in that way, or they're projecting in some way, or whatever. But it does matter. That's not okay. And yeah, that's really hard, especially it's like you're so tender, like after a big event like that, it's like you're just a big squishy marshmallow. And like if anyone pokes you, like you feel it. And it's just, we don't need any more of that. So that's hard, but I'm glad that didn't happen often and that you had that support. And I think what you said too is really important for people. Like you don't have to say, there's nothing for you to say. It's just for you to listen and ask more questions and allow them to talk about it. And I know it's uncomfortable, like as someone listening, it's uncomfortable to be like, how do I fix this? Like, what do I say? What's the right thing? And it's like, there's literally nothing to say. Like, even I felt that sometimes when I was on the phone with you, I'm like, what do I do? Like, I can't let her feel this way, but it's just like letting her talk about it and letting the person talk about it. And yeah, so listening is just extremely powerful. And for every situation, it's a great reminder.
Yes, absolutely.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you?
You can follow me personally on Instagram at KaseyT23. That's KASEYT23. You can also follow my nonprofit at the Scooty Fund on Instagram. And we are also on Twitter, I believe, at the Scooty Fund as well.
And is the Scooty Fund, what is Scooty Fund offering right now?
So it's a mental health nonprofit focused on the well-being of young adults. And we're actually releasing a podcast later this month called Scoot. So look that up. We're also working on an app, various in-person programming and educational programming through our social media.
Incredible stuff. Definitely check out Scooty Fund. It's so great, especially for men. Not that they solely focus on that, but it's men's mental health is definitely advocated in everything they post. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Kasey. You are so brave for sharing about this experience. And I know something like that comes up a lot is when we share about our pain. It's like, well, what if the other person listens to this and we start, we don't want to share anything because of we don't want to make them feel bad. But like our stories are so powerful and it's really important that we share what's happened so that we can like you're going to help so many people by sharing this podcast. So thank you so much.
I love you. Thank
Love you.